You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You know, sometimes it seems as if we're always waiting in stasis for something. We were waiting for Mueller, remember that, for a long time, and that turned out less than definitive. We were waiting for impeachment. Now we're waiting for the vaccine and waiting for November and the elections. Passivity is not such a great mode to be in, so to galvanize us from reaction into a more active state, we have a perfect guest for the conversation. Mona Eltahawy is here, the dynamic Egyptian-American journalist, author, agitator, and activist, also friend, sister, colleague. Her first book, titled Headscarves and Hymens, pretty much convulsed the Muslim world and kind of the rest of the world to boot. And now she's come out with a second, titled The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls. And she returns to the program as a guest to talk about what those 7 sins are. And there's lots more coming up. I should mention that we will be off next week, but right back the week afterward, June 14th, with a brand new show. For now, though, we better dive right in and go inside the headlines. The deaths of more than 100,000 Americans in a 2-month period due to COVID-19 and to Trump regime incompetence, and the Minneapolis murder. These are headlines, and I'll address them in fighting words at the end of the program. Here we go inside the headlines, to the stories that likely went unnoticed or were read but then dismissed or forgotten. Like in March, Greece's first woman president was sworn in. Katharina Sekularopoulou, former head judge of the highest court in Greece, was nominated by the Prime Minister and approved by a 261-33 vote in Parliament. Like the equivalent of the Nobel Prize in Literature, the Nobel Prize in Architecture would be the Pritzker Architecture Prize, for the first time being awarded to 2 women this year, Shelley McNamara and Yvonne Farrell. Like women students holding the position of editor-in-chief for their programs, Law Journal, flagship, at every one of the top law schools in the nation, for the first time ever. It's the most competitive and one of the most prestigious positions in law school, with editors chosen by their peers. While in the U.S., Donald Trump busied himself reviving racist sayings in speaking about Minneapolis, not even a dog whistle this time, but a brass band. The German government, meanwhile, was busy banning 2 clubs linked to an anti-Semitic movement that refuses to recognize the modern German state. The Interior Ministry ordered raids on the homes of the group's leaders in 10 different German states as part of a crackdown on the country's extreme right. An NGO that monitors far-right online activity, the Amadou Antonio Foundation, likens the Reichsbürger movement in Germany to the sovereign citizen movements in the United States, who also reject the federal government. Not because Trump is running it. That's a federal government they like. The German group recently asserted that the pandemic was fake, what else is new, and that measures to fight it are ways for the state to exert control. But the raids disclosed not just conspiracy addicts. They unearthed weapons as well as propaganda and narcotics. Perhaps because Germany has been down this road before, even spawning the Trump family, maybe they've learned their lesson. It seems that way. Would that the United States could learn by following that example of wisdom without enacting the Nazi road on which they learned it. Oh, yes, and Trump is now taking on social media as his newest enemy. You know, in a way, big tech and Trump deserve each other, and I'd rather have them in opposition than as evil twin allies. But in a toss-up, my money would be on big tech. They're evil, but they're smarter. Saudi Arabia is back in the news again, still under the iron fist of the authoritarian young Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who claims to be a modern ruler while routinely jailing his family and any hapless woman who he spots acting like a human being. One was a relative, Princess Basma bint Saud, a daughter of Saudi Arabia's second king and a cousin of Prince MBS. She's lived quietly for years in England, yet made it no secret that she was for human rights and change in Saudi Arabia. In a 2012 BBC interview, she called for a constitution in the kingdom which would, quote, treat men and women on an equal footing, protect individuals from the whims of judges, modernize divorce laws that do not protect women's rights, and change an education system that has left our youth vulnerable to fundamentalist ideologies and terrorism, close quote. Not bad. But she fell for the royal family's promises to modernize and liberalize the kingdom and returned in 2017, and then began to criticize Prince Mohammed for isolating those who disagreed with him. She was arrested in 2019 with her daughter, Soad, as she was planning to seek medical care in Switzerland. No charges were ever set, but the detention has stretched now for over a year, and her health has deteriorated severely. She did surface in April on Twitter with an appeal about her health, having received no medical care. This month, her messages were deleted. What a mistake to be female and pro-human rights, even if you're a princess in Saudi Arabia. But one hopeful note. In previous episodes, I listed some of the women leaders who notably handled the pandemic effectively, although comprising only 7% of world leaders. Women heads of government in Taiwan, New Zealand, Finland, Iceland, Germany, and even the little island of St. Martin on the Caribbean started early and intrepid testing, tracing, isolating, and treating, and brought their countries in with lower contagion rates and far fewer deaths than surrounding countries led by men. Men were acting blustering and were inept in their effects, like the United States, with a notable exception of South Korea. There are more names to add to this women's list now, but one deserves special mention. She isn't a head of state, but K.K. Shodlarjali Lagar is a health minister for the state of Kerala in India. Her policies, compassionately but firmly enacted, have been hailed as the reason that Kerala, a state of 35 million people, has lost only 4 lives to the virus. What does that tell us about leadership? Now, this last story will seriously change how we perceive reality. Our notion of height is about to be transformed. Across the United States, the heights of structures, landmarks, valleys, hills, etc. are about to shift. Most will get shorter. Parts of the Pacific Northwest will shrink as much as 5 feet. Alaska by 6.5 feet, Seattle will be 4.3 feet lower than it is now. According to Alana Mitchell in her good piece that was not on the front page of the New York Times but deserved to be, well, according to that piece, that's because height is only height compared to a reference point, and that reference point is determined and defined by geodesists, who calculate the Earth's shape, size, gravitational field, and orientation in space over time. Definition of height in the U.S. will take a decade and a half to accomplish, and it's called height modernization, part of a broader effort in the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, to establish where and how the U.S. physically sits on the planet. That seems a good idea to know, huh? Well, this new National Spatial Reference System encompasses height, latitude, longitude, and time, and it's expected to be rolled out in 2023, according to Juliana Blackwell, director of the National Geodetic Survey. It aims to replace reference systems dating from the 1980s that really are askew, having been derived from calculations done long before supercomputers or GPS. Errors in height are magnified as one moves diagonally across the country from the southeast to the northwest. Now, there's Luddite resistance to such accurate updating, of course. Coloradans worry that their mountain peaks will now fall below a threshold that they can boast about. Citizens of Beaumont, Texas will have to face the fact that certain areas have subsided so much that their region now sits in the floodplain. People don't like that kind of change. Many people don't want to know that the heights have changed, as if not knowing would change the reality that the heights have changed. It all started with Thomas Jefferson, who in 1807, when president, established the Survey of the Coast, forerunner to the National Geodetic Survey, to chart the waters and the coasts on the eastern seaboard. It was the nation's first civilian scientific agency, and the aim was to make shipping safer. Now, this new survey will also have to grapple with climate change and how humans are affecting the shape of the Earth itself. As we warm the planet, we melt glaciers and ice sheets, which raises sea level, changing mass, and eventually changing height, which uses sea level as the reference for zero elevation. So you thought you knew how tall you were, or where you were, or what time it was? It's time for our first short break, but we have a full show ahead. Starting at the end, there's fighting words, and then moving forward, there's those 7 necessary sins for women and girls. But before we get to any of that, we have to go into the place that is spreading around the universe, the Surrealism Corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Lately, friends and colleagues have been complaining that they've lost track of time while being cornered in lockdown. Tell me about it. That's called surrealism time. A gang of monkeys in Delhi, India, attacked laboratory assistants at Mirage Medical College and escaped with a batch of coronavirus blood test samples taken from 3 patients. One of the monkeys was later spotted in a tree chewing at one of the test kits. The medical college superintendent said that the kits were still intact and, quote, "We don't think there is any risk of contamination or spread," close quote. But a senior biologist from the Tamil Nadu Forest Department had previously been warning that if the monkeys caught the virus, it could have a devastating impact on primate species, well, it already has, and the wildlife that prey on them. Now, according to the Times of India, this is the latest example of the highly intelligent, red-faced rhesus macaque monkeys taking advantage of India's nationwide lockdown. The monkeys have been causing absolute chaos, snatching smartphones from people walking along the street, breaking into homes, colonizing areas around Delhi's parliament and the sites of key ministries, from the Prime Minister's office to the Ministries of Finance and Defense. They snatch food from working civil servants. They tear files and documents after climbing in through the windows. Wow! What I want to know is how much of this has been strategized by Caesar, and where is Dr. Zira when we really need her? While we're on primates, you might note that humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, and those lovely bonobos who solve every quarrel just by lovemaking, will all have an unusually high tolerance for alcohol because of a shared genetic mutation that allows us, to metabolize ethanol 40 times faster than other primates. Speaking of primates, and why am I desperately seeking segues? Did you know that only 17% of women, female humans that is, said that planning for retirement was their top financial goal? Only 17%. That was in a 2018 survey. Now, since women live longer than men in all cultures, that got me wondering why they don't plan for retirement. It certainly is not that women are lacking in the planning department. Then I realized it's that women truly understand the old rubric that women's work is never done. So they know women never really get to retire. All across Europe and the Middle East, strain is being felt by churches, synagogues, and mosques, and their parishioners as the lockdown relatively lifts or persists, one or the other, in different places. After a May 10th Baptist church service in Munich, 40 churchgoers tested positive. There were riots in Jerusalem. Well, there always are riots in Jerusalem, but lately it's because Muslims have been trying to attend prayers at Al-Aqsa Mosque. Religionists all over have been pushing back hard against secular state orders, with the result that in France, for example, the highest administrative court ordered the government to reopen houses of worship, saying that religion was a fundamental freedom. Well, yes, but some parishioners were understandably skeptical, as one French woman who was reported as asking, "How should communion be given? With pliers?" In the United States, of course, with Trump's cynical encouragement, evangelical and fundamentalist churches, part of his base, are blindly breaking laws in their rush to get the virus, because that's what assembling really amounts to. Earlier this month, 35 of the 92 people who attended Bible study sessions at an Arkansas church caught the virus, and 3 died. They, in turn, were linked to at least 26 more cases and another death in the community. How's that for Bible studies? With all respect for people of serious faith, I cannot help but wonder, as a jolly, metaphysical atheist, doesn't this make clear the real motive of religion? If a God bestowed a killer virus on a population with intelligence and free will, surely that God would want them to exercise such capacities, yes? And not commit, in effect, suicide, no? So it seems clear that religion is, after all, not about a supreme being, but about oneself, one's own needs, insecurities, decisions, at its best about a sense of community, and at its worst a feel-good status quo comfort, an excuse and a shelter from facing a beautiful but entropic and indifferent universe. Meantime, while demanding that the churches open, not so much the synagogues and mosques, mind you, Donald Trump himself spent Sunday tweeting viciousness as usual, playing golf on one of his golf courses while the Secret Service accompanied him at taxpayers' expense, and ignoring the statistical and real passing of the mark of 100,000 American deaths from COVID-19. More lives lost than from the Korean, Vietnam, and Iraq wars combined. That qualifies as deranged and sadistic, whether or not you can call it surreal. It's time for another break here, but the conversation with Mona Eltahawy this week, the fiery Egyptian-American feminist who fights for women's rights and freedom, all women, and in particular Muslim women, well, that's coming right up. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
For today's conversation, my guest is a returnee to the program, the Egyptian-American journalist, author, and feminist activist, Mona Eltahawy. Mona has a new book out and has been traveling the world organizing. She is, as always, memorably outrageous and justifiably politically outraged. She's a force majeure on Twitter, and anywhere else she tosses her flaming red hair and jangles her bracelets. She is funny and smart and a friend. I should also say that we taped this interview shortly before the pandemic hit, which explains our innocent, total attention to other things with no mention of COVID-19. The virus, of course, then threw all our scheduling into disarray, and this is the first chance we've had to air the interview. Here is the irrepressible Mona Eltahawy. Mona, welcome back to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much for having me back, Robin. It's great to be back.
You've been traveling the world, you've been organizing, you've been speaking, and now you come out with a brand new book, which is absolutely terrific, called The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls. And it turns the 7 deadly ones right on their heads. You could say this could be called the 7 necessary imperatives, or whatever the opposite of sins, blessings, for women and girls might be. Just talk about the 7 not deadly sins that are necessary for women to survive, much less thrive.
Absolutely. So these so-called sins, obviously they're not sins, they're wonderful things, but they are attributes and values and things that women and girls are not supposed to want to do or to be. And of course, what tells us we're not supposed to want to do these things is patriarchy. So I thought, okay, how can I put together a book that aims this kind of, I consider this book a Molotov cocktail to throw into the guts of the patriarchy. So I put together these 7 necessary sins, and they are anger, attention, profanity, ambition, power, violence, and lust. And I got the inspiration for those 7, all of which I love, of course, all of which I embody as often as I can. At the beginning of last year, in February of 2018, when a young Pakistani woman called Sabika Khan posted on Facebook that she had been sexually assaulted in Mecca in Saudi Arabia, which is the holiest site for Muslims, while she was performing pilgrimage, which is the 5th pillar of Islam. Exactly the same thing had happened to me when I was 15 years old in 1982, when my family went on our first pilgrimage. And so I wanted to show solidarity to Sabika, and I'd written about it before, but I wanted to show solidarity to her, and also to carve a space for women of Muslim descent in the Me Too movement. So I began a hashtag Mosque Me Too. And that went viral.
Mosque Me Too.
Mosque Me Too, yeah. And 5 days later, and I of course, there were Muslim women across the world who very courageously shared their stories. But of course, I was told by lots of men, you're too ugly to be assaulted. You just want attention. You're just trying to make us look bad. The usual rubbish.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so 5 days later, I wanted to go out and, do my self-care, which is to dance, because I love to dance. So I went to a club with my beloved, who you know, in Montreal, Canada, and we were dancing. And on the dance floor, now, I was sexually assaulted in Mecca when I was 15. I am now 50 years old, wearing a tank top and jeans, not the hijab of the Hajj. And on that dance floor in Montreal, and I feel a hand on my ass, and I thought, there is no way this is happening again on this night where I'm supposed to be, loosening up. So I found the guy. I found him on the dance floor because he was walking away. I grabbed his shirt from behind. He fell. I sat on him, Robin, and I punched, and it was glorious. And then I began hashtag I beat my assaulter. And that went viral. And I thought, ooh, I'm onto something here. And so I began the sins.
Yes, well, I mean, it's an amazing chapter to read because it's a lot of feminist writers, still not a critical mass, but a heartening amount, have come out recently with books on anger. Rebecca Traister, Good and Mad, Soraya Chemaly. I think it's she's beautiful when she's Rage becomes her, right? Brittany Cooper wrote a beautiful book about Black women's anger and the specificity of that.
Eloquent rage.
Yes, and that all heartens me tremendously because I've been a little tired after decades and decades of seeming to be the only cranky, rude feminist. So, well,
that's why we love you.
while others are much more politic. But so anger, women, and of course with the Me Too movement with Tamara Burke and so forth, anger seems to be something that women are really, really trying against all conditioning, not only in this country but cross-culturally, to deal with and accept their own and in fact enjoy their own. And I long for the day when they relish their own, which is so great about your beating up this guy. But the other quote sins: attention, profanity, ambition, power, violence, and lust. Ambition, women have touched on certainly because we're not supposed to have it. It's unwomanly. But the others are really interesting and different. Talk about attention for a minute.
Sure, absolutely. So as I mentioned, when I began hashtag #MostMeToo, one of the first accusations, and this always happens, is you're just looking for attention. You just want attention. You're an attention whore. And, for a while, I mean, like many years ago, that used to really reel me in. And I would think, no, I want something much bigger than that, much purer than that. I want you to see this racism that I'm fighting against. Like remember when we were supposed to have dinner and I was arrested on a New York subway station for spray painting over a racist ad?
We never had dinner. I spent the night raising bail and getting you out of jail. Yes, I know. I remember.
Exactly. We both remember that night very well. Of course, I was accused of wanting attention. And that was a turning point.
If you're going to take a stand for something that you want to bring attention to, like racism or sexism or whatever, if you're the messenger, you have to get, attention.
Absolutely. And that was a turning point for me, that when I got arrested. Because when I was accused of wanting attention by starting hashtag #MostMeToo, I was then able to turn it around and say, you know what? I do want attention. I want attention because my ideas are important. I want attention because I deserve attention. And I want attention because the attention that I already garner and this fame that I have saved my life twice. Because when I was beaten and assaulted in Egypt in November of 2011, the attention that I have, because people know who I am, saved my life, because that's what made the Egyptian authorities eventually release me. Had I been an unknown Egyptian woman, I don't know what would have happened to me. And then again, the attention that I do garner because of who I am after I was arrested got the Occupy movement to ask an attorney to come and represent me, and he did pro bono for 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I wrote this chapter to say, we deserve attention. Don't shy away from attention and say, yes, I want attention, and just turn it upside down.
Well, it's a human need, first of all. If you don't have attention, you believe that you're invisible. I mean, and there is no you. An infant begins to understand itself by mirroring the expressions that are aimed at it. And so if it's ignored, there is no expressiveness. So it's absurd, but it comes out of that tradition where, women are supposed to be wallflowers and be in the newspaper only 3 times: when they're born, when they marry, and when they die. So
exactly.
It's unladylike to draw we wouldn't want to draw attention to oneself because it's being eaten up like all the oxygen in the air by the boys. Yes. And profanity is another interesting one because talk about that.
I'm a massive fan of profanity. I mean, I begin every lecture I give by saying, my name is Mona Eltahawy, and this is my declaration of faith. Fuck the patriarchy. And honestly, Robin, there is nothing that makes people sit up and pay attention, talking of attention.
It definitely gets their attention.
Definitely. See, I know what I'm doing. Because I'm a woman of Muslim descent, but I'm a woman of color, because. And so I'm a massive fan of profanity. And the whole point of profanity for me is to continue this tradition that I learned about through this incredible Ugandan feminist called Dr. Stella Nyanzi, who is currently in prison in Uganda for the so-called crime of offending the longtime dictator of her country, Yoweri Museveni. Now, in the 1940s in Uganda, anti-colonial activists who were fighting the British colonizers and their local collaborators were using what became known as radical rudeness to upend kind of like the decorum and the civility. Now, we keep being told to be civil to Trump supporters, that I will not be civil to someone who doesn't recognize my full humanity. So that's civility and racism. And for me, profanity is like verbal civil disobedience, because it says what really is profane here: the violence of patriarchy against women and girls, or the language that I use to aim at that violent patriarchy. And that's why I uphold the sin of profanity. And I give examples from around the world, including Cardi B, the very well-known rapper here in the U.S., including Stella Nyanzi, including Michelle Wolf, when she did the roast at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and Pussy Riot in Russia.
Well, I tell you another aspect of it that I've discovered, which is that it is extremely effective in dissolving stereotypes. You say it's particularly shocking to people coming from a Muslim woman. And I would say it's particularly shocking coming from an older woman. For example,
yes.
Now that I'm an older woman, now that I find myself, woohoo, an older woman, it's all the more offensive to me if I'm walking down the street and there are young, pale males taking up space in that broad stance where you have to walk around and find yourself in a tree pit in order to get around. There you are, you're walking along, you're carrying 2 big grocery bags or something. Do they move 1 inch? No. So there I was one day doing precisely that. And in fact, he looked behind him, saw me, and stepped back into me, and I went flying into the tree pit. At which point he said, lady, are you okay? Well, I'm lying in the tree pit among scattered parcels and groceries. I mean, checking before I move to see if I can move my limbs or if anything's broken. It was a hard fall. And there I am in the middle of 7th Avenue in New York City, lying face down on the pavement. And I turned around. Just my head was all I could move at that moment. And then out came a string of curses against him, which so shocked, you could see his face turn red and then white and then red again, because here was this 5-foot-tall, silvering hair woman lying face down on 7th Avenue, letting out a string of expletives. I could see that his stereotypes, all of them, about women and old women, and old people, and standing in the street and everything were getting rearranged at the moment. And he stepped back in fear just because of the words. So I add that to your lexicon, because it also cuts the stereotype of nice little old lady. Ha 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 ha.
Absolutely. I love that anecdote. I'm so glad to hear it, because one of the points I make in the chapter is that patriarchy doesn't just control our bodies and doesn't just control the space we can take up in the world. It also polices our language. And the more marginalized a woman is, the more policed her language is. So it would be older women, it would be working class women, it would be women of color, it would be women of Muslim background, all of that, because that's all part of the way that patriarchy polices our language.
Sometimes shock has to be employed,
definitely,
in strategically. When I first began being an organizer of feminism, I was coming out of the left, and my language was peppered with expletives. And there I was going around the country. This is in the 1970s, when Sisterhood is Powerful first came out, almost 50 years ago. My God. Anyway, so there I was going around the countries, and I found that speaking, wearing my combat boots and speaking as I was speaking, with not only a lot of expletives, but a lot of words that ended in TION and ISM, a lot of jargon, was not reaching women who were working as homemakers in Iowa or in Texas or in Oklahoma, but they were feminists. So I began to adapt to what they were, what they not expected, or rather what they didn't expect from a feminist. I was coming across as everything they were told feminism was that was bad. And I wanted to shock them into saying, I'm just like you, but I'm angrier, and you can be too. So I kept the jeans. I changed the boots to slightly more fashionable ones, and I adopted silk shirts. So there was a mixed message going down, and I cleaned up my language a little. And what do you know? They were not so afraid of me. Now, feminism has become, in one sense, accepted, in another sense, co-opted. It's a much more complex playing ground, you know, given that Hollywood stars and rock stars call themselves feminists now. Yes. And that's good. That's a good thing, but it's a complicated thing. So now to shock is to change the stereotype in a different fashion. Do you follow me? I mean, the point is to freshen the message each time, to freshen it.
Exactly. And that's why I'm stepping in and saying it's too polite, and I reject this politeness.
And also, P.S., for any listeners who are hurt or offended, just a little touch from the scholarly etymological front. Fuck is one of the oldest words in the English language. It was used by Chaucer. It was used in Middle English. And in fact, the four-letter words that we shy from today have become shied from because they are such old words that were used well before Shakespeare and were used commonly. They were not used with any opprobrium attached to them, but they've been around for so long and been considered so old that they fall into disuse. And then when they are in disuse, they become persona non grata. So that's just a little word from the scholarly front there, you know, just throwing that in. Anyway,
Thank you for that. That's great to hear.
Let's move on to violence. Power, women are going more and more toward and are less and less afraid of having, because women have finally got it that we're not talking about power over the way patriarchy has. We're talking about power to. And I want to talk about the last two sins that you mention, violence and lust. Let's talk about those.
Sure. With violence, I mean, the inspiration for that was, one of the inspirations was me beating up this man. And when I did, and I started hashtag I beat my assaulter, one of the many women contributed to this hashtag that went viral, and one of them was a professor of law called Mary Ann Franks. And she wrote to me and she said, what you did tonight was an example of what I call optimal violence. And she sent me an article that she wrote in a journal of law about how society would be much better if women exercised or showed more justifiable violence against men's unjustifiable violence. And that's what she says that I did. And so what I did at the beginning of that chapter was to paint an imaginary scenario in which I say, imagine every day we began to kill 5 men. And then after 2 weeks, we began to kill 100 men, and then 500 men, and so on and so forth. How many men would we need to kill in this imaginary scenario so that patriarchy would send some representative to say, okay, stop, what's going on? Let's sit down and talk. And I say, and I know this is a very disturbing scenario, and I've already, in a couple of interviews and reviews, had women say to me, listen, I am a mother of sons, and I don't want to imagine this culling that you're talking about. This is too much. And my response to them has been to say to them, this is very telling that you feel so disturbed by my imaginary scenario, because this is an imaginary scenario that has upset you so much, and yet the real day-to-day violence against your daughter and other women
is happening.
Such a normal backdrop that you're not even disturbed by it.
Yeah.
So that's why I put in this violence chapter.
Yes. It's interesting because I'm sure there'll be resistance to that for good and bad reasons, because women have been so programmed away from violence and made to think of violence as such a male thing. And we want a nonviolent world, yes, but that means how do we get there? And lust. Let's always end with lust. It's a lovely thing to end with. And to start with, for that matter. Take it away.
Well, lust, for me, was a way to extend an argument that I began in my first book, Heads, Clubs, and Hymens, Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution, which you and I have talked about, and which you generously blurbed, Robin. And what I began there was, for me, the heart of the revolution, and that is the declaration, very simple and deceptive, but very powerful. I own my body. Not the state, not the street, not the home, the church, the mosque, the temple. I own my body. And through that declaration, I say, it is my right to have sex with whomever, obviously with their consent, whenever, with a man, with a woman, with multiple men, with multiple women. And I tease that out in this chapter because as a woman of Muslim descent, as with many women who come from faith backgrounds, I was raised, my society, my community, my family, with the teaching that I should wait to get married till I have sex. I held out on that for as long as I could, and then I was like, I'm done. I'm not waiting anymore. And then I say, it's taken me a while to really get rid of all of that stuff that I was taught.
Yes.
At first I had to get rid of the guilt. And then I had to discover who I was and what I wanted from that declaration, I own my body. So in that chapter, I work through some of the things that Bell Hooks has said about subversion and desire. And then I work through that on my own. And I say that the older I get, the queerer I become. And I talk about my own embrace of polyamory and rejection of monogamy and heteronormativity. And then I talk about the importance of the queer struggle or the queer framing of sex when it comes to patriarchy, and how the chaos and liberation through the challenge to heteronormativity and other normativities, for me, is at the heart of sexual liberation. And then I tease the reader by saying, it's beyond the scope of this book to talk about my own sexual journey and my increasing queerness. Tune into the next book, in which I will discuss that more.
Watch this space, kind of. Yes, that's a very, very clever ending. The book is called The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls. And of course, it's by Mona Eltahawy. Read it. It will make you lustful and angry and power hungry and probably potty mouthed, and all sorts of other good things. And you'll have tremendous fun reading it as well. Thank you, my dear, for being with us on Women's Media Center Live. Stay safe. Love you much.
Thank you so much, Robin. It was great to talk to you. It's always great to come back. Thank you.
And now it's time for our final break, but I'll be back shortly with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Elegies can be fighting words. Tonight, the cities of my country are burning again. Because, again, armed white men in blue uniforms wouldn't again let a black, unarmed man again breathe. And in small towns and farmhouses in the breadbasket and the Great Plains, people are differently dying, the virus anchored inside their lungs, growing there, so they can't breathe. The blows come so fast now and heavy, you can't stagger up from the last one before the new one knocks you flat again. National economies are collapsing. Heat waves sweep Europe and South Asia. Wildfires blister the western U.S. and Europe and Australia. Water scarcity is already an emergency in South America and Southern Africa. And there are record swarms of locusts. A cyclone slammed into the Indian megacity of Kolkata. Pounding rains breached 2 dams in the U.S. Midwest. Forecasts warn us Atlantic hurricanes this season will be severe. During the lockdown, people gladly noted the sharp reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. but the decline has nowhere been near enough to shake loose the thick blanket of gases wrapping the earth. Asthma and emphysema are on the rise. People can't breathe. Seawater levels swell and storm surges punch through embankments, drowning paddies and fields. Generations that had lived on farming and fishing were migrating to urban areas to survive, but the lockdown ended that. The coronavirus pandemic, which has killed approaching 500,000 people globally so far, is both a product of and colliding with a fast-heating planet whose catastrophic warming threatens millions of people and millions of species, which will go extinct. Death is one thing. An end to birth is something else. It had been predicted for decades, even for a century or two, but the Cassandra scientists were ignored. What had not been predicted was suddenness. The corner turned, the words that once spoken cannot be unsaid, the rapid slide and crash of what was going to last at least another century until we could think up creative solutions. But how can you think when you can't breathe? Despite the warnings, the rapidity has taken us by surprise. But there was no way to prepare for the shock of the volume. So much, too much. My God, an avalanche that never even pauses so you can catch a breath, a lava flow that accumulates mass while gaining speed. The glut of news, hideous and toxic as the thousands and thousands of lies blizzarding down on us from the demented creature who stalks the corridors of power in this most powerful country on earth. We are surrounded by the volume, swimming in it, drowning in it, buried in it. We can almost no longer tell where we end and it begins, the spew of rotting glut that chokes the cry in the throat, smothers the scream, muzzles the curse, suffocates the memories of and the possibilities for a republic. The cities of my country are burning again. Black citizens rejecting death, black bodies being shot and clubbed, black soul and flesh being suffocated, dying again and again, pleading, "I can't breathe." Eric Garner 6 years ago in New York. George Floyd 6 days ago in Minneapolis. The chokehold, the same last words. So many times, so many men, so many deaths. Nor are the women spared. Alberta Spruill, Rekia Boyd, Chantel Davis, Shelley Frey, Kayla Moore, Kyam Livingston, Miriam Carey, Michelle Cusseau, Tanisha Anderson, say their names. And Breonna Taylor, just a month or two ago, young, lovely, skilled, a certified emergency medical technician who loved to help people, asleep in her own home with her boyfriend when a fatal police charge through the bedroom door in the middle of the night sent 8 bullets pocking through her body. How many more names? Too many names now, too many names already. So much mass that the precious, unique, individual detail of each magical life gets lost. Just another name, lost in the numbers, in the lists, in the effort to remember who, when, how was she killed, how was he murdered, when does this end, how can we make it stop, turn our heads, refuse to swallow it, vomit it up. It is taking too long to learn how. And meanwhile, tonight, farmers are coughing and spitting and gasping in rural hospitals lacking equipment to keep them alive. Some of them fell for the story that this was the fault of people in cities, but now they can't breathe. Land of plenty, more, greedy more, overstocks of stupidity, generosity of lies, cornucopia of lies, and then lack of clarity. Facts, oxygen, time. I don't show my despair in this space. Prose is the language of law, of the grocery list, letter, the speech, inspiration, polemic, the bedside note jotted down after that nightmare you dare not forget. Poems alone can contain the despair. Poetry's strong enough to surround it, keep it safe, let it grieve, mourn, howl. Prose is the language of rage. Prose burns the cities, throws press briefings, signs executive orders. Prose is for rallying, strengthening, carrying on. Poetry, too, can do that with a snap of its fingers, but also will bring a casserole to the house of the dead woman's mother, put down flowers in the street where the dead man was shot. Prose provokes vengeance, invokes peace, forms committees, promises change, passes laws, maybe actually enforces a few. Poetry closes the eyelids and pulls up the bedsheet over the face. Poetry IDs the body. Prose is the medium here, then, because my despair tonight changes nothing. The planet has little time left. I have still less. My skin is still white, and my only tools are these words. But tomorrow we go out arrayed in our finest despair, inching forward step by step, one foot in front of the other, until our part is over. So forgive me tonight for revealing this glimpse of despair. Although who dares to say you and I have no right to despair? If that's where we stop, though, if we let ourselves stop, we deny the sole act that we know alchemizes despair. To acknowledge it. Prose has my gratitude for letting me free my despair from the chokehold of silence. Breathe, reclaim it, respect it, and share it with you. Poetry sits by the coffin and weeps. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for this week. We'll be off next week, but then we'll be back on June 14th with a brand new show. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.